I never thought a few words spoken in a quiet living room could unravel a life we'd spent so long building together. My husband Adrian and I had been married for 7 years and together for nearly 9. Our life, at least from my perspective, had been one of steady love and quiet contentment. We had our routines. He worked as a software engineer, logical and patient, bringing home stories about code and algorithms, while I worked as a veterinary technician, caring for animals with gentle hands and a compassionate heart. We had no children yet, though we'd talked about it now and then. Maybe next year, we always said, when things settled down. Our home sat in a cozy suburban neighborhood, complete with a small garden Adrian tended to on weekends and a spare room we sometimes referred to as the future nursery. We had inside jokes, a shared love for certain TV shows, and a comfortable familiarity that came from knowing each other's habits intimately. Sure, the spark of our early days had softened into a warm glow, but that's to be expected after nearly a decade together. I thought it was normal, even reassuring. It felt like we were doing love right, patient, understanding, and stable. When quarantine restrictions eased, we decided to celebrate with a virtual double date. Just me, Adrian, my sister Emily, and her longtime boyfriend Trevor. Emily and Trevor had been together since high school, making Trevor practically part of the family. Adrian and Trevor had grown particularly close over the past year, chatting on the phone or FaceTiming at least twice a week. I liked that Adrian had found a friend in Trevor, someone he could relax and joke with. I believed it strengthened the bond between our families. That evening, we all hopped on a group video call, wine glasses in hand, laughing and catching up. We reminisced about silly stories from our past, teased each other, and enjoyed a carefree atmosphere. After about an hour, I grew tired, my head swimming with a pleasant buzz from the wine, and decided to leave the group call. I wanted a private chat with Emily about some family matters and future plans. Leaving the two men to their conversation, I stepped into the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I called Emily directly, and we spent another 30 minutes laughing and discussing lighter topics. I assumed Adrian and Trevor were talking about sports, tech projects, or random gossip I wasn't interested in. Little did I know that Trevor had taken the opportunity to divulge stories he remembered from my college days. Stories I never fully disclosed to Adrian. Back in college, I was wilder. Before meeting Adrian, I'd had my share of casual flings and hookups. It was a phase defined by youth and curiosity, fueled by parties and the exhilarating freedom of independence. I'd never shied away from telling Adrian that I had a robust dating history, but I didn't detail every escapade. Some memories I considered too trivial, too embarrassing, or just not important enough to taint our present. After all, we both had pasts. Adrian himself had been with several women before we met, and I never demanded a detailed ledger of every encounter. However, Trevor was different. He knew me well back then, had witnessed some of my more outrageous nights. And one particular incident stood out among them. A night when I got caught up in the excitement and ended up hooking up with multiple guys at a party. It was a wild, drunken mistake that I'd buried deep in my memory, something I considered a youthful slip-up, not reflective of who I became as an adult. Later that night, after my call with Emily, I returned to the living room and found Adrian quiet and withdrawn. He barely looked at me, responding to my attempts at conversation with monosyllabic answers. We went to bed lying side by side in the darkness, the silence heavy. Just as I was drifting into sleep, Adrian's voice cut through the stillness. "Did you get gangbanged in college?" My heart plummeted. "What?" I managed to say, my voice cracking. He repeated the question, explaining that Trevor had told him everything about that wild night and my multiple partners. I lay there, stunned, feeling naked and exposed in a way I'd never felt before. There was no use denying it. I confessed that, yes, it happened once. I was young, reckless, and it was a one-time event I didn't even recall clearly. Adrian had more questions, pressing for details I didn't want to recall. He fixated on that incident, unable to let it go. His anger, though quiet, was palpable. I felt his disappointment like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I tried to explain that this was ancient history, that I was a different person now, but my words seemed hollow. In the days that followed, I tried to approach Adrian gently, to reassure him that my past didn't define my love for him. Yet he became distant, leaving me guessing what he was thinking. By Wednesday, he stopped talking to me altogether. No morning kisses, no texts asking how my day was going. I tried to respect his need for space, though anxiety gnawed at me like a persistent ache. Then one night, out of nowhere, he asked if I was still friends with those guys on Facebook. Honest as ever, I admitted that I was friends with them, if you could call it that. I barely interacted with them, but I never unfriended them either. Adrian said nothing, just left the house, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. I worried for his safety, but calling the police felt too drastic. Instead, I waited by my phone, praying he'd text me or come home soon. When he finally returned late at night, he was cold and distant, refusing to meet my gaze. It felt as if a stranger had taken over my husband's body. Determined not to lose him without a fight, I tried to open a dialogue. I asked him to sit with me, to let me explain. I told him that I understood his feelings of betrayal and disgust, that I understood how shocking it must be to learn such details from someone else. Tears streamed down my face as I laid out the truth. I was foolish and young back then, searching for validation in the wrong ways. I never wanted to hide it to hurt him. I just never thought it would matter after all these years. Adrian listened, arms folded. "I can't get the image out of my head," he admitted flatly. "All these guys, it's like I'm marrying someone I don't know." I tried to propose we see a couples therapist, maybe talk this through with a professional. But he shook his head. "You already deceived me by omission," he said. "Therapy won't erase what you did." I insisted that not mentioning every single college encounter wasn't the same as lying, but he wouldn't have it. He was furious that I gave him a sanitized version of my past when he had always been honest about his. Before we could reach any clarity, tragedy struck our lives. One of Adrian's close relatives, a figure he considered a mentor and second father, died in a sudden car accident. The funeral was imminent, and we found ourselves caught between personal heartbreak and a collective family loss. In the wake of this tragedy, I tried to console Adrian. I offered to help plan the funeral, to support him in his grief, but he resisted my involvement. "This isn't about us," he said bitterly. "This is about my family, my loss." He treated my offers of help as if they were attempts to insert myself where I wasn't wanted. I wanted to be there for him more than anything. My own pain felt secondary to his loss, but he refused me at every turn. He considered my presence a contamination of the solemnity of the moment. Frustrated and heartbroken, I reminded him that we were married, that we promised to stand by each other in sickness and health, in good times and bad. He only scoffed, claiming I'd broken those promises by not being fully transparent, by carrying secrets he had to learn from someone else. When I tried to plead, "At least let me be here for you," he shut me down. "You've already shown me who you are," he snapped. "I don't need your sympathy now." Hurt and desperate, I suggested that maybe we pause the divorce talk, focus on the funeral and supporting each other through this loss. Adrian would have none of it. He said my attempts to help were selfish, that I wanted to look good in front of his family or pretend nothing happened. Eventually, he demanded that I leave him be. He stopped speaking to me altogether, even when we were in the same house. The silence became suffocating. He packed a bag and moved to his parents' home for a few days, then to a small apartment he kept for emergencies. I called out to him, asking him not to cut me off completely, begging for a chance to at least grieve alongside him, since I too cared about his family. He ignored me, walking away without a backward glance. Alone in our home, I tried calling him, texting him, emailing him. He blocked me on social media, and when I tried to approach the restaurant he co-owned with his brother, I was turned away by the staff, clearly instructed by Adrian to keep me out. The finality of it crushed me. I packed a small suitcase and left the house I had shared with Adrian. I found a temporary furnished apartment near the clinic, a cozy one-bedroom with enough light to nurture my indoor plants. I decided to move on with the divorce, to free us both from this limbo. We had no children, no complicated assets, just a life that was once shared and now needed to be untangled. With no contact from Adrian, I was forced to do what I should have done sooner: look inward. My therapist, whom I decided to see after our initial confrontation, helped me process the layers of shame and regret. I learned that I hadn't owed Adrian every sordid detail of my past, yet keeping something so explosive a secret carried its own risks. If I had told him earlier, would this have changed anything? Or would he have reacted similarly, unable to move past his discomfort? On the other hand, if Trevor hadn't decided to spill my secrets to Adrian while they were drunk, maybe we would still be coasting on the surface of a content life. The blame game led nowhere, only fueling my frustration. Weeks turned into a month, and the funeral came and went without my participation. Through whispered updates from my sister, I learned that Adrian was stoic and distant at the funeral too. It seemed I wasn't the only one he was pushing away. The death in the family had hardened him, or perhaps unleashed a part of him that resented any imperfection, any wrinkle in the tapestry of his imagined life. I focused on maintaining my daily routine, waking early to care for rescued animals at the clinic, losing myself in the kindness I could offer creatures who didn't judge me for my past. In the afternoons, I visited my sister, who offered sympathy but lacked the magic words to fix everything. As time passed, I found a strange peace in solitude. Without Adrian's presence, I rediscovered pieces of myself I had neglected. I read novels I'd always meant to read, tried new recipes, and even considered taking an online course in animal behavior. My heart ached with longing for the man I once knew, the gentle soul who had proposed to me under the starlit sky, promising a future of love and understanding. But I had to face the reality that our marriage might have hinged on illusions and unspoken expectations. Perhaps he wanted an immaculate past, while I brought a more complicated history. As I signed papers and arranged the last details, I felt both relief and sadness. I'd loved Adrian with all my heart, but love can't survive without trust and acceptance. In my new home, surrounded by boxes and the scent of fresh paint, I began to rebuild. I deleted old contacts from Facebook, unfriending every reminder of the college chaos. I embraced a new chapter in my life. Maybe I'd volunteer more at the shelter, enroll in a creative writing workshop, expand my skill set beyond veterinary tech work. The world felt open and wide, no longer confined by the silent judgment of a partner who couldn't see beyond a single story from my past. As I settled in, I found compassion for myself. Yes, I had a wild past. Yes, I kept some details from Adrian, but I also worked to build a steady, loving home, to be a loyal partner, to create a future together. I wasn't perfect, but neither was he. In these last pages of my story, I acknowledge that life rarely unfolds in a neat, linear way. My journey with Adrian was complex, a tapestry of love, misunderstanding, revelation, and loss. I might never fully understand his silence or his refusal to reconcile, but I do know this: I am more than the sum of my past mistakes, and I have the power to choose my future. I will embrace my flaws, learn from them, and never apologize for my humanity. Some endings arrive unexpectedly, but they also pave the way for beginnings unimagined. And that, at least, gives me reason to hope.